Hi, this is Jack Vincent, and you're listening to the Agile Uprising podcast.
Greetings. Welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jay Hersko. We're doing a cold open. It's me. It's James Gifford, who I haven't seen in God knows how long. James, how are you?
I've just escaped from a safe black site because I've been working on a framework to just not, well, yeah, it's actually not a framework, but you don't need safe to scale your delivery of your product world. So I escaped. I'm now here, hopefully, baby, out on the lamb, and we'll get some fun times again.
If the State of Agile report of this year is to be believed, I think a lot of people are waking up to that the future is what you told me 5 years ago. It is bespoke, custom solutions, context specific, set and setting. And no, we're not talking about tripping. Okay, so what are we going to talk about this week? So I recruited James because I wanted to go in. He just published an article on LinkedIn, which was titled "The Journey Continues: Traditional Maturity Models and Sustainability Programs and Organizations' Broken Compass." So, Jeff, let's dive right in, right? So you start off talking about maturity models. How and not to say there are bad ones and good ones out there, but there are, right? I've used LAI, I've used the Agility Health Radar. There's a lot of those things out there, but I do think we short shrift ourselves. So let's start off with good journalism is talking about the current idea and why it doesn't work. So what's your 2 cents on why the idea of maturity models might be a little bit broken?
I mean, well, if we look at like the definition of a maturity model, one of them is it's ripening. Are you a piece of fruit, Jay? Are you? I know you might be a meat widget, but you're not a piece of fruit. So ripening is like people achieving kind of milestones, like from adolescence to adulthood. You know, you reach that ripe old age of 16. Well, that means clearly I'm 16, I can drive a car. No, you actually have to learn to drive a car. So I'm more likely to get into a car with a person that is proven, that has a license, because at least there is some level of skill that has been verified and tested and validated.
Mm-hmm.
So the general challenge with these maturity models is it starts to create like a destination. It creates that number. I'm chasing a 1, I'm chasing the destination. And I mean, the opening of the manifesto, we're discovering better ways of delivering software by doing it and helping others. It indicates a learning.
Right.
The lean, one of the values of lean is pursue perfection.
Right.
At frequent intervals, we stop and we talk about how good we were or how bad we suck. You know, that number 12 thing, I just butchered that, but the whole thing is like continuous learning. So by focusing in on a maturity, that destination, you're going to plateau.
Right.
And that's why the maturity models kind of like in my mind are just not the right place to go to. Because like oftentimes when you're doing these transformational activities, you're trying to change something for a reason. There is a goal, there is a destination. And as we've been working with a lot of different things to help people understand the journey, because you do need to give people a vision and a direction and like, what should I learn? What could the organization be striving for? One, you give them that connected vision of where we want to go and why, and then they can understand why they're potentially changing.
Right.
And where we want to go in the long term and why it's beneficial. I'm focused on a maturity model. I'm focused on getting.
You're focusing on building trees, not building a forest. Yes. When I read your piece, James, the first thing that jumped out at me was before we're even getting to the bad target measure, that whole quote is the monster in the room of Mr. Dunning-Kruger, right? Where getting people to actually understand where they are and answer, get them to have the self-awareness to say, I'm not always a 5. Sometimes I am a 3. And I have joined organizations and seen teams do self-assessments where their radar is all at the cusps, on the edges, which would imply that they are just fantastic at everything. And that okay, for the first one, that makes sense. Okay, now you know where people are coming from. I get it. But then you have to work to get them to understand why you think you're an 8 out of 10, you're actually a 3 out of 10. And even the creating that fulcrum, right? That fulcrum point where you got to lean against that 8, and then use that to figure out, to not figure out, to show someone that they're not really an 8, they're a 3. It's a, dude, it's a lot of work. And I wonder, is that the best? Is the juice worth that squeeze? Getting people to develop that, hey, we're not as good as we think we are. And then I wonder, is that even a worthwhile endeavor? Just forget that. Just let's, like you said, here's the North Star. Let's go march towards it. Let's figure out a way to get there.
I think, I think it is where, like, and you sent me that culture article, which is so funny because there's so much in there that is so true. But like in a big corporation, you you're definitely going to experience the Dunning-Kruger effect because there is that pressure of like, we got to be mature, we got to be awesome. My boss is looking at this, and they haven't made metric, they haven't made, Josh Karievsky, they haven't made safety a prerequisite where they can actually realize that they are less skilled than they would like to think. Now, on the contrast though of a startup, you might be a one team of 8 engineers. You generally know how much you cost and how much runway you have. And if we can't figure out how to get stuff delivered effectively and work together, we're going to run out of money, and then I'm be out on looking for a job again, which is not too, software development people,
Right.
it's not that big of an issue to find potential gigs. Maybe not at your choice company, but like there is that sense of like, we need to figure it out. We need to work together. We need to deliver. You're gonna have a different sense of how you're progressing through because of the culture of
Right.
the organization.
A startup has the enabling constraint is funding. We need to get this done by this date in order to get funding, to your point, or else we're all unemployed. Where when you get to these big, large, enterprise-sized organizations, and my definition of an enterprise, I got to ask somebody, well, what's the difference between just a regular organization and an enterprise-sized organization? I said an enterprise-sized organization is an organization so big that you could never ever in a million years know the name and role of every single person in the company.
Yeah, that's big.
That's enterprise, right? That's scaling past the Dunbar. So one of the things that you start off in the article is you said, okay, well, maybe maturity metrics and maturity, maturing procedural maturity, it's not the right way to go. So your suggestion was, well, let's go the other way and let's talk about building capabilities. So for the layman, James, how would you describe a capability and then compare and contrast what you're saying, capabilities versus capability focus versus maturity focus?
Like this is the hard thing because like at work we use capabilities as our like description of a feature. So like the world gets muddy, or we're building a business capability. But at the same time, like you are building, like when you're building a business capability, you're building a set of things that your company can do. It comes like this is straight up from the lean world, and this is how they talk about it. But in reality, when we talk about capability building, it is the development and mastery of skills. So, if you're a in martial arts, you're working through a series of belts on your path to eventually becoming a black belt. And at each level, you're demonstrating to your sensei, your instructor. I forget the actual, Master Fisher is going to be mad at me if he ever listens to this podcast because my daughter's in karate. And so like this is where some of this stuff kind of started trickling into my brain as I was dazing out, staring at, people going, yeah, hi-ya, and kicking pads. But you progress, you demonstrate skills, like they're very rudimentary. And each time you put in so many different classes, you're ready for an evaluation of let's demonstrate these skills and see if you're ready to then move on to the next advanced technique. So that is what capability building is. It is the learning and building of proficiency of skills. Now, if you're a software developer and you've had the fortune of learning test-driven development, or like, code, test first development, whatever you would like to call it, you've had the opportunity to understand like how to write a unit test, how to make that test fail, and then write the code to then pass the test. You may not be really good at that. You may leave big holes in like things that your unit test strategy and how you think about walking through that. But by having a buddy, a pair that has more experience, that more tenured developer, they're going to be able to go, oh, hey, you missed that. Or when we get to this point where it's an integration point between this system and this system, we need to think about it like this, and we might write the test like this instead of like you have it now because of the interface, or that data may not be ready. So we're going to use mocks until it is ready. So like, let's build your test set around like that. So in essence, it is a skill. You may have somebody that's more proficient with you to help coach you and enable you and guide you through the learning and development of said skill.
I like that. I like the definition, the learning and building of the proficiency of skills, right? That's truly what a capability is. And so one of the ingenious things I thought about this article was we had a conversation a long time ago, and I think you were part of it, where we were talking about the usage of high paid consultancies. And I think I'm going to give a shout out to Chris Merman. I think he made the remark of, somebody made the remark of, we all shovel the same shit. And Merman's response was, sometimes the shovel matters, and they use a gold-plated shovel because they're expensive. So I'm gonna tie that to what you did in this article, because you actually found the gold-plated shovels, and you said, look, I'm not crazy when I say we need to build in capabilities. And you basically hit the murderer's row of every $350 an hour consultancy out there and gave multiple, 350 at the minimum, I should say, at the minimum. And you gave multiple examples of where you're saying, look, I think we should concentrate on things like flexibility and implementation, for example. Oh, well, here's a McKinsey article. Hey, maybe we should talk about sustainability, or we should talk about, I don't know, integrate behavioral factors and how that's going to lead to better capability development. Oh, well, BCG Global has something to say there. So where did that come from? Did you say, hey, you know what? These guys can make the argument better than me? Or what led you to say, hey, I'm going to go use these guys to my advantage?
Well, so there is some level of like shenaniganry here. I will be honest, because I mean, I'm not a big six consultant guy. I'm not a person that like, I've worked with some really talented, awesome people from like big consulting firms, but I'm not necessarily going to go hire a management consulting firm. Like, there are smart people all through your organization. It does become demotivating, kind of like destroys things by bringing those folks in. But when I wrote this, like I have a number of connections in my like LinkedIn kind of Rolodex of over the years, um, that are in these enterprise companies that do have like, that are constrained by the like their main sources of understanding or gravitation because of the culture of the company is we've had so many years of good luck with these managed service companies or management consulting companies. We generally listen to them over our internal people because of our track record, our history, and we may not have had the skills in-house to do it long ago, and we've since changed our hiring, but we still go back to them because it's like Linus's
Right.
soft, or Linus's blanket's kind of dirty and gross, but it's a safety blanket.
Yeah.
And so, to make my point, around 2019, like McKinsey had one methodology that they brought to folks around like changing culture and managing work. And well, around 2021, they changed it. So one in 2019, they're very focused on maturity models and this type of organizational health assessment and one thing after another. Well, come the pandemic hits, 2020 happens, you can see like the time and publication of some of these articles, 2021. So literally in the 2-year span between 2019 and 2021, they may have been over here selling you something, but in 2021, they completely changed the package and offering, to the point where that tool they had, like the run said assessment over here or management, they're on the verge of like wanting to deprecate that thing because now we're in 2024 and they're 3 years past. But they do have a lot of relevant articles because they have started kind of changing that focus. A lot of what these management consulting companies, and especially in the McKinsey space, have been selling a lean-based leadership philosophy. So like there is that whole notion around capability building and skill development that is coming out more. Anybody that read the Accelerate book, I would say that some of this is also a catalyst. I wrote another piece earlier back in November around capability building versus maturity, but with the spin on like Dora and the
Okay.
DevOps research and like bringing in Accelerate. So like Accelerate happened in what, like 2018, 2019? Can't remember publication dates there, but it was definitely before the pandemic.
Okay.
That whole book on like the DevOps research, just all of that kind of propelled a different kind of mindset. And so like you start to see this paradigm shift in the management consulting organizations as the times change, just like with generative AI. But this isn't just crazy James saying that like we should be doing this.
Right.
It,
Right. And
this
that's
is
the selling point. This is coming out of the ecosystem, right? Like, I mean, you want to use the term of the new sphere. These are all things that are starting to pop up organically in different places, which leads me to believe that the tide has gone out and the world is changing. And one of the so I don't want to drain the article because I want people to go and I want them to read it because I got some value out of it. So a couple of the things you talk about when you talk about building capabilities, right? You hit on these things that are almost no duh, but at the same time, there are a lot of consultants and authors who make a lot of money off pointing out the no duh to people, right? So uh let's talk about, I'm going to grab one or two randomly, James. Let's talk about when you talk about sustainability. What does that mean? Because that's a word that gets thrown around in IT circles, no matter depending on the type of nerd you're talking to or where they're coming from. What does that mean when it talks about with your definition of capabilities, right? Learning and building and proficiency of skills. Well, how does sustainability come into play?
well, I mean, this is what people are always kind of chasing after. I mean, you have the change. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you need to be able to maintain the new norm. So people focus on creating sustainability. Like I don't know how many what's the number that like they quote? It's like 70% of all transformations fail
Uh,
after. I can't remember
two,
the failure rate.
two
Or
out of three large scale cultural changes fail. 2 out of 3 on
so
average.
it's
So,
good. So it's a good chance your stuff's going to fail, and it's because people don't have a sustainability model. And
mhm.
we talked about how like changes will erode if you do not keep pressure on the rudder. Like using that nautical analogy of being out to sea, if you're not constantly keeping pressure on the rudder, you will go adrift. And
Yes.
that change that you have kind of instilled, it it will go adrift with it. And then like before you know it, the rudder's falling off, and now you're just like, adrift in the
Mhm.
sea, and you may run into Medusa and just other shenanigans. But like sustainability, even like if you look at like what sustainable farming is, sustainable forestry, it is that renewable ability to kind of keep producing things that is good for both the environment and, you know, the company at the same time. The sustainability of resources, meat widgets, whatever you want to call them,
Mhm.
but that is what we're trying to do with sustainability. But if you're galvanizing people in that continuous pursuit of learning and perfection and like skill improvement, if you create that learning culture, it becomes less about the need to like have the expensive sustainability
Right.
plan, people to maintain it, monitor it, because it will sink into the culture and DNA of the organization and then become self-sustaining.
Right, right. So the idea of sustainability is you really do want to basically, here it is, this is a terrible metaphor, probably, impregnate it into the culture into a way that it's not going to come out, right? And some of your later pieces, and even some of the stuff you and I were sending back and forth, right, on the article on cultural drift by Robin Hanson. Jim Rutt just had I should link it in the show notes. He just had a long conversation with him about that, about how certain things get stuck, and then over time there is, the trending towards entropy, you're going to get a little bit of wobble, right? Mura, is it? Mura is wobble, right?
Yeah.
You're going to get more and more of that. You're going to get off the mean, and then stuff's going to go awry. So I think, I mean, if we were going to talk about the general failure of transformation initiatives, no matter what kind of transformation you're talking about, I really do think you're right. It's the ability to get it down to the I'm to use the term here, morphic kernel, right? The low level kernel, to get it down in there so every permutation forward will have that embedded. That's James, I don't know if a lot of organizations have the attention span, have the willingness to stick it through, right? Because we know that these things take a long time. And your approach of forget your maturity model, throw it out the window, worry about building capabilities. I think that makes more sense because you're building resilience into the people that make up the organization. So when things change, you're not married to a frame, you're not married to a methodology, you're married to I guess a deliberately developmental organization, and that's where the value is going to come from.
And that's what I mean, and that's how you kind of build that stuff in. Like, and this is one of the beauties of kind of like focusing in on like, I don't totally use James Shore and Diana Larson's book or and even the Agile Fluency model, which you can find it at agilefluency.org. We'll put that in the show notes. But there's actually a book that sits behind that. So like you go in and cruise around their site, like James Shore wrote the book, The Art of Development. And as they're talking about it, it's kind of that learning journey. Teams make the transition from traditional work to like more team-based, value focused versus project focused. It doesn't get into the whole like, projects to product or like any of those other, buzzwordy kind of deals. But it starts to talk about like a team should be able to manifest these types of things. Like you should go and see them, and this is what it would look like. This is what it would look like if they were doing it. And if they're not doing it, here's some suggestions on how to potentially get them back. You should invest in people that have experience doing this, but they should be able to, when you go to see them, they should be able to do this under duress. So like not only they're they've developed a level of proficiency that they're able to do this under stress. Because like we've seen, what happens when the management squeeze comes on, it's all hell.
Right.
Just throw it out. Where's the bathwater? Let's throw it out with the baby.
Right. Everything gets chucked. Yep.
But so it talks about that, and they talk about the like kind of multiple progressions. So like you're focusing. I can't remember it because we rebrand it because of the zone language doesn't resonate with people. But like think about it. So like you're progressive, you're repeatable delivery. So you're teaching people process agility, quality built in. So now you're really focusing on all the technical practices, DevOps, potentially some flow. The next is like the product-led organization. So now you're grounding them into like changing that culture of value where you're empowering product teams. We're not go all Marty Keegan on you. And then the tail end of that is like all the crazy stuff that actually is agile adjacent, but that actually makes it happen. Your beyond budgeting, your holacracy, your spiral dynamics, like stuff that Troy is just like over here nerd salivating over, which
that's truly deep. I'm going to reuse the word. That's deep kernel cultural change where you're really changing you're changing the DNA of the organization, and that's a lot. So let me ask you this, James. I'm going to get a little bit off topic here. So you've talked about the maturity model and agile fluency. You've talked about capability building. You've mentioned the 37, 36 Baskin Robbins flavors of lean. Is that where the agile world is going? Are we going back to a more lean centric? Give me if you're looking into your crystal ball, do you think that's where is that where we're going? So I will say this. I really liked the metaphor that Jürgen Apollo made where he said agile isn't dead or dying, it's dissolving. It's just becoming part of what companies do. And I think that's a really, really brilliant mental picture. So then what does that leave the agile industry? Are we dissolving with it, or what do you think, James?
Agile's not dead. It was always lean.
Okay.
You ever seen that? It wasn't a dress. It was a cape, kind of commercial for the ladies' restroom sign thing.
Yep.
No, but I think when you look at the industry, like agile, iterative development, the ways of that, like kind of development, it's there. Like people know it. it's not like a thing that people really avoid doing anymore. Like it has become mainstream, been over commercialized. And it's funny, like these things that don't end up with like a monetization strategy end up dying. Like you go back to
Mhm.
2000, like the early 2000s, Mary and Tom wrote the book Lean Software
Lean software
Development.
development. Yep.
It is literally the marriage of lean and agile together, but there was no cert, there was no commercialization. It was just the book. If you read that book, it's super impactful. You go to circa 2014, I want to say it is, Des Humble and the dude from like one of the dudes from the Lean Startup wrote the book, The Lean Enterprise.
Yep. Yep.
You know where I'm going here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so like there's this bringing back to lean. The whole DevOps movement was about the three ways, or basically it was the nerdier version of the goal, theory of constraints.
Yep.
You're starting to see people focusing more in the throughput counting space. So like we were having this kind of intellectual conversation around the marriage of value stream mapping with throughput accounting, because throughput accounting is about how you get value through your organization,
Yes.
where value stream
Co-
mapping is
yeah.
the the removal of said waste, which both could be potentially counterproductive, but they could also, in the right package, be totally powerful to an organization. These are all things that came out of the lean movement. As you,
Cost accounting's prevalence as a managerial decision-making tool is one of the most destructive things to happen in the Western business world. And actually, in that book we were talking about before we started recording, we talked about the big con. I forget the the authors' names. It's two authors. They talk about the rise of cost accounting as a decision-making framework, how it's been propagated by your big six, and how it is just it is terrible. Throughput accounting is the better way, but it is obscure and it takes a bit to understand. And most of throughput accounting stuff is out there for free. You know how many
Mhm.
people are out there talking about it for free, and yet, but nobody. It's like I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. But anyway.
But anyway, so like we've seen like we've seen the reemergence of like Kanban, like when it was just David
Mm-hmm.
Anderson and like the monopoly there, like with Pro Kanban coming out and kind of putting another offering into the market. Um, it, so we're starting to see this momentum towards lean, the momentum towards flow-based delivery, value streams made a comeback. We were talking, that's one of our literally top most downloaded shows of all time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one of the Jay first solos right there.
Man, I
Um,
was nervous as a long tail cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Keep going, keep going.
so we see this happen around the 2018 Agile conference. Melissa Perry comes on the scene, starts talking about, product management and how basically the Agile industry, Agile was really focused on like getting it done, not the actual strategy. And we left a big
Mm-hmm.
hole there. And, Marty Keegan, the Silicon Valley Product Group has come along, and they're like, now that we have the product talking heads, um, and I'm not disparaging
Besmirching
like
him. No, no, no.
no, like this is the kind of that tangential like progression. And then at some point, all the work that Don Reinoston's, or I've said his name wrong, but the theory of
Yes.
principles of product flow,
Yep.
it's all kind of starting to culminate into that, where you have like that best breed of like agile iterative development meeting up with like lean product development. And most likely it will merge into that kind of bespoke lean product development. It will probably retake over the world, even though we lost it for a couple decades. But like when you start to see how much goes into writing the software in a manufactured car, there are literally full simulators that you can
Mm-hmm.
use to test how a car is actually like in the in the ether. It's doing the juke and jive, and the computer's actually reading it and then responding and giving you like sensor inputs. So not only has like manufacturing actually crossed into the agile world, and it's purely lean focused in most manufacturing organizations, you're seeing lean bleed back into um, that. And
Yeah.
it's funny, like X Scales, like Peter Merrill talking about like the bespoke meta framework, the framework of frameworks, Cusack talking about the BAMF.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it was like it was just this idea of like there is no right way for an organization to pursue it. You got to figure out how agile you want to be. So what's agile enough for you, and really kind of figure that out. But if you're not learning, you're not growing, you're not pursuing the right things, you're gonna fail.
I'm taking us out of here on that note because there's no other way to cap it. So I will throw the link to James's article in the show notes. I'm also going to throw some links into some of the pieces of content that we discussed. Check it out. When you're done listening, when you're done reading, find us on our Discord server. We are up and at 'em and talking away. So there's quite a lot of people contributing to the conversation. Find us there. We do have a Patreon if you want to offset production and hosting costs. It's not much. But it is out there if you want to chip in. And thank you to the Machine Man Records and Krebs who provides our outro music free of charge. So James, thank you for your time. And until next time, this is the Agile Uprising Podcast signing out.